I am Director of Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran. I'd like to welcome you all, the audience, distinguished panelists, and as you know, we have a very important topic to discuss today, which is consensus on non-proliferation, how to strengthen the regional elaboration with regard to curbing non-proliferation threat. First and foremost, Israel's nuclear arsenal with tens of warheads and variety of delivery systems, together with its strategy of ambiguity, is the actual threat of non-proliferation in the region of West Asia. However, the good news is that there is consensus around the world from many stakeholders on the need to stop the threat of proliferation, especially in the West Asian region. In addition, we need to highlight that to deliver the job, we don't need only the goodwill. We need action-oriented results based on concrete strategies from all stakeholders of the region. And those whose role is very important in achieving this goal, which is long overdue, especially in our region. Today, we are going to unpack several questions, key questions on the way to create synergy between the stakeholders and to strengthen the level of follow-up and all efforts of creating such a region in West Asia. And of course, we have been given some central questions, and the paradox is, as I mentioned, how to create synergy and correspondence between these two goals. On one hand, these two aspects. On one hand, we have the threat of proliferation, and on the other hand, we need to reconcile the security concerns of individual states in the region and with the regional stability. And all of them should be, of course, oriented to the imperative of non-proliferation regime. So the question is that, can we elaborate cooperative frameworks to replace zero-sum approaches? And crucially, what lessons we have learned from the past experiences, both in terms of successes that we have achieved or the failures that we have faced. We are happy and very fortunate to have a very distinguished panel here. And of course, they are well-known experts and scholars, and I know that you have been, you have had chances to get familiar with these distinguished panelists. We have Karen Hallberg, Secretary General of Pugwash. We have Hossein Shahristani, President of Pugwash. We have Cesar Jaramillo and Paolo Cotta, both members of Council of Pugwash. And last not the least, we have Naser Hadian, the faculty member of Faculty of Law and Political Science of the University of Tehran. I do believe that their insights will help us navigate the questions that I'm going to share with them, and hope that we'll receive a round of answers from the panelists. And of course, I should remind and encourage all the audience to pay attentive attention, to listen actively, to reflect critically, and to raise questions and possibly remarks at the end very constructively. So we'll start first with the questions, round of questions to distinguished panelists, and then we'll have some time at the end to have your feedbacks. So without further ado, I'd like to start with the first question, which is, what are the key factors contributing to the current consensus on nuclear non-proliferation in the West Asian region, and how can they be strengthened? And we start first with the reply and feedback from Karen, and it will be followed by replies of other panelists. So, floor is yours, Karen.
Thank you very much. Is this working? Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Balouji. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here in Iran after 9 years. Last time I was in 2016. So I really want to thank the IPIS and the local organizers for the invitation. We are a small delegation from the Pugwash Conferences for Science and World Affairs. So we are trying to see how we can help in all the topics you mentioned, Professor Balouji. So just, I don't want to be long, so I have my notes, not to extend too much. So the question was, what are the key factors that contribute to the current consensus on non-proliferation, and what can be done? So we all know that in the region, nearly all the states are parties of the NPT, except for Israel. This shows will to build consensus on non-proliferation. The second point is the countries in the region show the will, because of the NPT, to avoid a non-proliferation cascade. And the third point is a desire for civil nuclear energy for the development of our countries. I come from Argentina, and I will give some examples of what we are doing regionally in the region in Argentina together with Brazil. Of course, there are great differences in the regions, not in the humanity of the people, of course, but political differences, cultural differences. And I just take it as an example of how to get inspired. So how to strengthen the consensus? I think the most important points are to promote a regional WMD-free zone, as endorsed several times by the UN, by UN resolutions. The WMD zone is fundamental to try pursuing this. Second point is to enhance regional dialogue mechanisms and confidence-building measures, and track 1.2, 1.5 or 2 diplomacy. So this is what Pugwash is doing. We're trying to enhance regional dialogue and dialogue between the region and other regions of the world. Third point is to reach regional agreements linking civil nuclear uses and non-proliferation, including the improvement of technical cooperation. I'm a physicist myself, and I know how important it is to reach technical cooperation. To reach technical cooperation to support peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So just as an example, the ABAC, the Argentine-Brazil Agency for Accountability and Control, was created in 1991 to strengthen mutual safeguards and to ensure the exclusively peaceful uses of nuclear energy in the region between Argentina and Brazil. So the principal mission is to guarantee that Argentina, Brazil, and the international community that all existing nuclear materials and facilities will be dedicated exclusively for peaceful purposes and for development purposes. And the objective is to administer and apply the system of control. So it's the SCCC. So it's a common system of accounting and on nuclear materials and accounting and control. While the ABAC is region-specific to Latin America, between Argentina and Brazil, as I said, its model offers valuable insights and potential applications for other regions. And I will come back to this after other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very pertinent points. And I should remind distinguished colleagues that it was actually Iran who initiated for the first time in 1974 to establish a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Can we have a perspective from Dr. Shahristani as well? Thank you.
Well, the Non-Proliferation Treaty is really the cornerstone for the non-proliferation regime in the world. It has been accepted, ratified more than 50 years ago. Now 191 states are members to it, with the exception of only 4 countries who are not state members. And it has been based on 3 pillars, basically. One is non-proliferation of nuclear weapons to non-nuclear states. 2, peaceful application of nuclear energy by all non-nuclear states with the support and help of the nuclear states. And 3, reduction and eventually elimination of nuclear weapons by the nuclear states. So these are the 3 pillars on which the NPT is based. The non-proliferation has been quite successfully adhered to by all the non-nuclear state countries, including Iran and all the Middle Eastern countries except Israel. And the peaceful application has been half success because the nuclear state countries have cooperated in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy with the states with whom they have good political relationships, and if they don't have that, then they normally don't cooperate. So the non-nuclear states haven't really benefited as much as they should have, according to the treaty, from this section. But the total failure of the NPT so far, in my view, has been the fact that the nuclear state countries have not seriously negotiated the elimination of nuclear weapons in their arsenals. On the contrary, now there is a new race to develop, upgrade, renovate the nuclear weapons in the States, in Russia, in China, which is completely contrary to their commitment under the NPT. Now, as for the guarantees for the non-proliferation, already Karen has mentioned that establishment of nuclear-free zones in the world. And there have been very good examples in Latin America, in Africa, in Central Asia, in other regions of the world, where these countries have totally agreed that they will never work to develop or allow nuclear state countries to station nuclear weapons on their territories, which is a very good sign. In the Middle East, which is one of the most critical regions of the world as far as tensions are concerned and antagonisms, there has been, as Haider Aliyev just mentioned, a proposal by Iran and Egypt over 50 years ago to the UN General Assembly to establish such a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. All the countries have accepted it. As a matter of fact, the General Assembly almost unanimously have passed that resolution. Since then, almost every year, the General Assembly has endorsed the resolution and called for the implementation. All the countries have agreed to attend a conference to discuss the establishment, except Israel, which is the only country in the region with the nuclear weapons. And the NPT review conferences that are held regularly to review the compliance of the countries, including the nuclear countries, with the provisions of the NPT, has been held regularly. In 1995 review conference, the nuclear state countries wanted to extend it indefinitely. So that's it's a kind of permanent treaty that everybody has to agree to. Some of the Middle Eastern countries has refused to extend it indefinitely without guarantees of the establishment of a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East. And based on that, the United States, Britain, and Russia have agreed to co-sponsor and co-chair a conference to establish such a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East. Again, 30 years have passed since 1995, and the 3 countries have failed to convene the conference simply because Israel refuses to attend such a conference. What guarantees do we have for non-proliferation, particularly in our region, which is a very hot region, not only climatically, but also politically. So the only guarantee we have is really to establish such a region. And it is the responsibility of the UN, it's a responsibility of the nuclear states, it's the responsibility of the General Assembly, or the members of the General Assembly, to work together to establish such a region. And we should not really accept any excuses from Israel for refusing to join such a region. I know I've taken a bit too long, but very shortly at the end, let us remember, nuclear weapons in the Middle East have never protected Israel from 4 wars with its neighbors. It has not protected Israel from what is going on now inside Gaza and the West Bank. They are useless for the protection or defense of Israel as they claim. And there is no reason whatsoever that can be considered reasonable for them to keep these weapons. For that matter, not only nuclear weapons, all the other weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons. Okay, Saddam had them. In Syria they had them. In Libya they had them. Which regime was protected by their weapons of mass destruction to save the regime from collapse? So this is a clear failure. And the argument that such weapons can provide security to anybody is absolutely false. Sorry for taking a bit longer, but I do feel very deeply about this.
Thank you, Dr. Shahristani, for historical perspective, as well as mentioning the obstacles of creation of Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons, which, as you rightly put it, these lack of implementation of Article 6 obligations by the nuclear weapon states, as well as in our region, the nuclear arsenal of Israel. Of course, when we refer to NPT, we usually start with its first pillar, which is nuclear disarmament, and I've never seen any reference to nuclear risk reduction or reduction of the threat of nuclear weapons based on NPT. What we have and we have to achieve is, in fact, nuclear disarmament, which is total elimination of nuclear weapons without any other caveats. Thank you very much, Dr. Shahristani. Paolo, what do you think about the question that we are discussing here?
Let me say, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think I would like to start with a little bit a reminder of what the situation is. The NPT is a very important instrument which is against proliferation and is limiting the number of countries, the name of the countries that can possess nuclear weapons. It's not a perfect treaty, since it allows some country to have nuclear weapons, someone not. But nevertheless, it has played a very positive role in the past. Let me remind it how. First of all, under the NPT influence, we had a drastic reduction of the nuclear weapons altogether, which shifted from 70,000 worldwide to the present 13,000. Which is a significant reduction. Second, the number of countries that possess nuclear weapons has not increased. Let me remind who they are. There are 5 countries, United States, Russia, France, United Kingdom, and China, that in a sense are allowed to possess nuclear weapons according to NPT. Then you have 4 countries which possess nuclear weapons, and then they are not compatible with the NPT, so they are not part of the NPT. And these 4 countries are Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. Israel have something like 90 nuclear weapons, that's the estimate that we have. Israel is the only country in the Middle East, on the West Asia it's called here, that possess nuclear weapons. Then there are countries that are hosting nuclear weapons belonging to other states. We have 5 countries that host nuclear weapons belonging to the United States. And these 5 countries are Italy, unfortunately, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and Turkey. And then, most recently, Belarus is decided to host Russian nuclear weapons. The host of nuclear weapons is negative in terms of the spread of nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, not nuclear energy, of course. But this does not mean that the country that hosts nuclear weapons can use them on their own decision. There will be decision to use them will be the owner of the nuclear weapons themselves. So in the case I was saying before, the United States, and for Belarus, Russia. So there is you have a decrease of nuclear weapons, the number of nuclear weapons, which is very important, but it is not the end of the problem. Since if you have the limited use of nuclear weapons, the 12,000 nuclear weapons, 13,000 which are around distributed in the world, then we will have a destruction of the world as we know it anyway. Even if the number of weapons possessed by country has decreased, then the danger has not been eliminated. That's most important. Then finally, I want to make a comment about the issue of the nuclear weapons in the Middle East. There has been, as I was saying before, a big discussion, which was promoted, in fact, also by Iran, about eliminating nuclear weapons and possibly weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. We had a very important discussion. The most important one was in 2010, where the United Nations decided to promote a special conference to discuss the nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. A special conference was supposed to be held in 2012 under the leadership of a Finnish guy whose name now I don't remember, but anyway. Ambassador, yeah, fine. But anyway, this never happened. So, Layava, yes, Layava, Ambassador Layava. Nice guy, but he did not succeed in doing anything. So, now we have, I mean, it was not his fault, but the general attitude of the countries all over has been not too positive, concretely not too positive. Israel always refused to admit that they have nuclear weapons, and they refused to discuss nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. Israel decided that unless there is a general, that was 2012, unless there is a general attitude to bring peace in the Middle East, they will not consider this issue of nuclear weapons. But have you seen now recently, the general attitude of Israel toward peace in the Middle East is not too great. Huh? So we have to see that, in fact, the situation, the behavior of Israel is very much critical and very much dangerous. So, concluding, discussing about the need of eliminating nuclear weapons in general, first. Second, discussing the need of eliminating nuclear weapons in the Middle East. They are all very important. They are not necessarily successful, but we should keep the idea flowing. We should keep the idea, the motivation of elimination of nuclear weapons as a very important instrument. And I want to say something which has to do also with the possibility, the attitude of countries which do not possess nuclear weapons. I fully understand that a country like Iran is, in fact, disappointed by the fact that there is no nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. But I will strongly recommend a country like Iran, which is behaving correctly in this front, not to decide to get out of the NPT. Since if there is a decision in general of countries which are disappointed, even for good reasons, by the effectiveness of the NPT, the killing of the NPT will be just bring out a cascade of nuclear weapons in the world. Other countries will follow the same attitude, and then many other countries will, in fact, acquire nuclear weapons. And if the number of countries that have nuclear weapons is increasing beyond any limit, then we are going to have a real danger of a nuclear war. Even now, since all the conflicts which are around, I'm talking about Ukraine, I'm talking about the Middle East, I'm talking even between India and Pakistan, all the wars which are around, or the limited wars, involve, apart from Sudan if you want, involve countries that possess nuclear weapons, then the danger of nuclear use is a very strong one. And we should be very careful in trying to reduce this danger for the benefits of humanity in general. And I think that up to now, Iran is behaving very correct. We have also a final point I want to make, and we can discuss the details later on. There is an important distinction between nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. If you are developing nuclear energy, that does not mean that you are developing nuclear weapons. And nuclear energy is somehow bound to be more important now than in the past, given the problem of the health and the safety origin of the energy production systems. So we have to, in a sense, bring on the issue of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. There is a big distinction between nuclear energy for peaceful purpose and nuclear activities for military purpose. The answer is no. So if you are able to enrich uranium to the level of, say, 3.5%, which was the limit of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, you are halfway in terms of energy to go to the point of 90%, which is the one which is needed in order to have nuclear weapons. Who is able to control that you do not enrich beyond the limits? They are international institutions. They should be supported. One is the International Atomic Energy Organization and the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. And we should reinforce this institution. We should allow this institution to go and inspect whatever is done all over the world. And we should, in a sense, appreciate the work that has been done by this organization up to now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paolo, for this very thorough and important input, and especially referring to the story of failure as well as successes of the NPT, and also referring to the arsenals by Israel and how it can be destructive in terms of our movement to create a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Now let's ask Dr. Hadian of his thoughts on this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to be a little bit unconventional and provocative in my presentation. Because, we have been involved in this process, Paolo, I guess more than 20-some years now. First of all, about the whole concept and construct of the Middle East or West Asia. I guess very much the problem can be this construct. I've already written about it for a UN agency and also discussed a number of my points in that article, which was published by UNIDIR. In that article, I argued that the problem can be, if we don't have Middle East free of WMD, we have to ask ourselves, why? Why still we don't have it? There are a number of reasons, which I'll address a couple of them here. First, and by far the most important one, is this construct. The Middle East basically is a construct which was articulated and developed by Westerners sitting in London, Paris, ships, looking toward their east. Those who were close to them, they call it Near East, further away, Middle East, farther away, Far East. That was okay. For a long time, we communicated with one another with this construct. And although we did not exactly denote and designated what are geographically the Middle East, and it was expanded and contracted depending on political persuasions of individual using it. But in general, still we had a vague idea of what is Middle East. But after a while, we came to the conclusion that Middle East is a reality. It is not a construct which denotes a reality. So that's why we think it cannot be changed. I have articulated an alternative conceptualization, which let's forget about it now. You can read that article, and in that I have conceptualized that. Number two is one country in the Middle East has the weapons, and that's Israel. Why Israel should give up these weapons? I don't see any reason, Paolo, that they should give up that capability. No pressure on them to give them up, and it gives them prestige, power, and at the end, security. So I don't see any reason that they are going to give up that privilege. Sorry, using the word privilege for the weapons. But the way it has been construed in NPT and the others, haves and have-nots. They have it. It gives them power and prestige. I don't see any reason today why France and Brits should be permanent member with a veto power of the UN. By far the most important fact, yeah, for a while, 100 years ago, they were very great powers. But certainly now, there are other powers who are more powerful than these two countries. But still, they are not permanent member, and they don't have the veto power. So it means it is implying that this is important assets, strategic assets which they have. But let's forget about the international scene and come to the region. To me, unless, that's why I want to be provocative, unless another country has the weapons in the region, Israel is not going to be obliged to, or forced to, or persuaded to come sit seriously at the table and negotiate about getting rid of their weapons. I don't see any reason. And unless we forget about, we said, okay, let's make an exception for Israel, which very few countries in the region would agree with it. First and foremost is Egypt. You know that the Egyptians are not going to agree with that idea. Same thing as Iran and Turkey and the others. That would not be acceptable to have an exception. So that's why I'm not all that optimist about the Middle East free of WMD. So we have had several decades of discussion about that. So I don't want to concentrate about that one too. I would like to concentrate on our program and the possibility of a compromise, the possibility of a deal with the United States and with the European, with the Russians and with the Chinese. How we can revive sort of an agreement. I don't want to call it JCPOA. I don't have any problem to call it JCPOA, but there is some sensitivity now, both inside Iran and in the US, about the JCPOA. So I don't want to get involved in that discussion. But in my next part, I would concentrate on the potential and the possibility of having an agreement, first with the United States and then with the others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And of course, it was not that provocative enough, but you're absolutely right in highlighting the need of the international community to put enough pressure on Israel to relinquish its nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. So now, Jaramillo, it's your turn. Please share your ideas with us.
Of course, thank you very much. And thank you to IPIS, to you, to my fellow panelists, and not just for the invitation, but for the very, very gracious hospitality since we arrived. Thank you very much. I mean, this is a very important question, and by now, pretty much everything has been said, but not by everybody. So, I mean, I would like to make a couple of key points. There is already consensus in the region, except for Israel. So let's make that clear. There is consensus on the fact that nuclear weapons do not enhance security. That also applies to Israel, even if Israel is not part of that consensus. You know, there is that reality. Nuclear weapons, and I believe it with conviction, that nuclear weapons do not enhance security. But we also need to distinguish between non-proliferation and disarmament, you know, part of the same conversation, but very, very different. And some players, including China, the United States, France, the United Kingdom, and the nuclear powers, would have us believe that the primary risk related to nuclear weapons has to do with the possibility that an actor may eventually acquire them. I agree that no new actor should acquire nuclear weapons, including Iran. Of course, Israel has to disarm. But the primary root of risk is the very existence of nuclear weapons. The risk of non-proliferation is a byproduct of the existence of nuclear weapons. And yet the very states that hold them try to persuade us that the risk lies elsewhere. Not in their own arsenals, but elsewhere, in the possibility that they might be developed, which I think needs to be addressed, and no one should be proliferating. But once again, the primary risk lies in the very possession of nuclear weapons. These states say, as long as nuclear weapons exist, we will retain a nuclear arsenal. Yes. But here's a variation. As long as nuclear weapons exist, nuclear weapons will exist. You know, it's a truism, it's a self-evident fact, but that is the logical straitjacket in which we find ourselves. So there is consensus in the region about the need for non-proliferation, except for Israel, but there is another consensus as well, and it extends beyond the region. There is consensus on the fact that the NPT is not living up to its promise. In fact, it's not just, and that is a generous way of putting it, there is profound disappointment in the erosion of the NPT and the broader global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. I was just in New York a couple of weeks ago attending the NPT preparatory committee, and I'm an optimist. It's almost part of my job description. And I confess, it's getting increasingly hard to walk out of the United Nations with any level of optimism. It's a performative, ritualistic, almost meaningless charade. You know, the level of discussion, and if you have attended previous meetings, it's just a repetition of the same. The majority of the world clamoring, almost begging for disarmament, and the states with nuclear weapons and their allies in nuclear alliances such as NATO are, coming up with excuse after excuse after excuse and diluting any references in the documents to specific benchmarks, targets, or timelines. They are not, and the NPT is I think headed to possible failure. As you all know, you might know, we're right now after 2 review conferences did not achieve consensus. We're headed to a third that will likely not achieve consensus either. Now the question is, can the NPT survive a third consecutive failure of consensus? And there is, I think, no reasonable observer that would observe the current reality and say, okay, we're on a path to nuclear disarmament, when we are most definitely not as an international community. It's not even that it's an imperfect path. We're sort of getting there, and there may be some corrective actions here or there. It's not either that the timeline is too ambitious. Well, they said by 2030, maybe it'll be 2035. It's that there is no path. There is no path. In fact, as the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists said earlier this year, we're at the highest risk ever, despite, as Paolo noted, the decrease in the actual numbers of weapons. The risk is higher than ever. Those old videos that you might have seen from the Cold War and the kids sheltering under the desk in school doing the drills, the risk is higher today than it was then, even at the height of the Cold War. The United States alone has undergone a $1.7 trillion once-in-a-generation modernization program of nuclear weapons. How can that be compatible with the goal of nuclear disarmament? It is not. It simply is not. And more recently, they're using this tactic of conflating modernization with safety. So whenever they're criticized for investing heavily in the modernization of nuclear weapons, they say, it's to keep them safe. And who fights with that? Who's going to argue against safety on principle? Of course we want safety, but I'm not persuaded. These investments, trillions of dollars, will all but guarantee that the nuclear disarmament goalpost is going to be pushed further down the line, by definition. And last, on the question of the region and the pursuit of the WMD-free zone, of course, we are now faced with a conundrum. Is it worth pursuing this effort without Israel? If you ask people, at least in the near future, most people will say Israel will not come to the table. Israel will not come to the table. I find that unacceptable. I agree with my friend here. There has been no pressure. But for whatever reason, it's pretty unlikely that Israel will come to the table. So the rest of the states of the region, no matter how much goodwill there is, will have to address this question. Is it even worth it without the one state that actually has nuclear weapons in the region? So that is a question that we will have to wrestle with unless and until there is clarity about the conditions under which Israel would actually come to the table. The second point, and just to wrap up, on Israel's opacity or its policy or deliberate ambiguity, that is not to be confused with lack of clarity. The fact that they don't admit, it doesn't mean that we don't know. Everybody knows. The rest of the world knows. Everybody knows. So they have nuclear weapons. So the opacity is internal, and I don't know who actually thinks that they do not have nuclear weapons. But I think that's abundantly clear. So I think we need to operate on the mindset of opacity or not. Israel is a nuclear armed state. And there are expectations that come with that about safety, nuclear risk reduction, etc. And the normative regime, as you all know, Israel has its nuclear arsenal outside of the nearly universal NPT. And the last point on the WMD zone has to do with the chicken and egg problem. Do we need peace and stability and security in the region before actual nuclear disarmament can happen? Or, some others might say, that only after nuclear disarmament has happened can we start to talk about peace and security and stability in the region. My own take is that they are not at all mutually exclusive endeavors. That nuclear disarmament and WMD, these efforts, need to be pursued aggressively, no matter the security condition. Not no matter, they need to be considered, but they need to be pursued under regional security conditions that are going to be predictably less than perfect. Because if we make peace and stability and security in the region as a hard prerequisite before starting disarmament, it will simply never happen. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaramillo. And
I want to make a two-finger point.
please.
Okay. I think that what you were saying is absolutely correct. The point that we have to understand altogether is that if the world is not perfect and the agreement are not perfect, is it worth to eliminate this agreement or not? My sense is that we have to live in a situation which is critical, try to adjust. We are not living in a perfect world. We want to avoid that any decision like eliminating the NPT will be turned around a situation which will be much worse than the present one. First point. Second point, so don't talk about eliminating the NPT. Try to keep things going. If you eliminate the NPT, if someone keep the nuclear weapons as they are, and there's going to be maybe more and more later. Second point I would like to make as a comment of the last question is that we have to distinguish between nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. They are not the same thing. So it's very important that we allow countries to develop nuclear energy. And that's why it's very important that we resist by all means to the attempt by the United States now to eliminate the possibility of nuclear energy for Iran. That's something which is very important. Iran has the right to develop nuclear energy. And it is not the same as saying that Iran has the right to develop nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for your comment. And in fact, my sense is that Jaramillo's remarks were not implying to kill NPT, and rather it was highlighting or recognizing the fact that the realities on the ground. And in fact, if there is any success of the NPT, it's because of honoring the obligations by non-nuclear weapon states, and it is a fact that nuclear weapon states are not meeting their obligations, and the credibility, and the second point, therefore, is that credibility of the NPT is at risk, and definitely the whole international community should work together to promote it. But it's mainly in need of the political will of the nuclear weapon states. This is the fact that many non-nuclear weapon states expressing the frustration of lack of progress in implementation of Article 6 obligations. They mention it in different fora. So now we can turn to the second question. And of course, I encourage distinguished panelists to interact to their respective responses. But in the meantime, reminding the time, we have less than 20 minutes for 4 questions. So please answer very short and sweet and concise, and then
Yes.
to have some feedback from the audience. So the second question is that how can regional coalitions be effectively built to support non-proliferation efforts while addressing the security concerns of individual states? Again, we can start with Karin.
Thank you, Professor Balouji. I think, as you say, most of the most important topics have already been addressed. So now let's try to go a little bit more into details. I just want to read a couple of points that I think should be important. How to address security, but effectively build support for non-proliferation. So there are 3 points I would like to emphasize. One is to adopt an incremental confidence-building approach. So start small, build trust, and expand cooperation. This is in complement to whatever international agreement Iran can reach. But I think the regional aspect is very important. The second point is to use incentives, dialogue, and mutual respect as a foundation of any treaty, of course. The third one is create security assurances and reciprocity mechanisms. For example, again, going back to the regional agreement, the ABAC between Argentina and Brazil. So this is mainly, I read the titles, this model, which could serve as an inspiration, is a model for regional and bilateral verification. It could be more than bilateral, because it shows an independent safeguards agreement and trust building in the region. Second is complementary safeguards to the IEA, so it is complementary to the IEA. In fact, Argentina and Brazil signed this agreement after signing the Tlatelolco Treaty, which is the region, Latin America, free of nuclear weapons, but before joining the NPT. So Argentina and Brazil agreed to this before joining the NPT, once they had their own agreement. This is not the case here, because Iran has already is a party of the NPT, but any additional confidence building or agreement in the region, I think, would emphasize it's complementary and it builds up. It's not redundant. I think it's necessary and it helps. Third, this is a sign of confidence building and normalization, and it has to do with building trust where mistrust once prevailed between Argentina and Brazil. There was mistrust. Of course, the animosity and the violence in the region is nothing compared to what is happening here. We had peace in the region, but it helped because there was an animosity. Argentina and Brazil could have eventually engaged in an escalation of nuclear weapons, and they didn't. And it also helps normalize relations through technical cooperation, rather than or in addition to diplomatic rhetoric. So technical cooperation in addition to diplomatic rhetoric.
Thank you very much, Karen. Without further ado, please, Dr. Shahristani.
Thank you. There is a lot that can be said about ways to cooperate among the countries in West Asia or the Middle East to help with the non-proliferation. I would rather leave it to the other panelists to detail it if they want, but I just want to emphasize one point so that the audience is not left with any misunderstanding. And that is what has been said. Israel is never going to accept to give up its nuclear weapons, and therefore it is almost a futile effort to pursue the establishment of a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East. I disagree with that. Israel is dependent, or rather say totally dependent, on the US for its security, for its economy, and for other important matters of national sovereignty. And if it wasn't for the total support of the US for Israel's wish to keep these nuclear weapons, they could not have kept them. And that's not only the US position, but also some of the Western European countries. So this question of Israel will never do it is not really the issue. It's the question of making sure that the world, through the United Nations, through non-state actors like Pugwash and others, to keep on their efforts and insist on the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone, not only in the Middle East. The Middle East is perhaps the most turbulent region that requires that, but throughout the world. And that is a very important thing. And we should never give up on our efforts for the establishment of this region. But of course, in the absence of this agreement, there is a number of other things that can be done. Karen have covered some of them. Maybe the other speakers can cover some of them. I don't really want to take too much of the time because there is very little time left. But we should all continue pursuing our efforts for the establishment of this and making sure the US will agree to that. And they cannot just keep on repeating what they've been saying.
Thank you, Paolo.
Well, about, I have two quick points about international cooperation. First point is that it will be useful, in my opinion, for this region if you have a clear cooperation in terms of the production of nuclear energy under the international control. But that's something which will be, in fact, involve all the countries, excluding Israel, if you want, and have them cooperate in terms of developing nuclear energy, which is an important part for the future. Second suggestion I have is about connection between nuclear risk and wars. I think what is now the risk related to nuclear weapons are not connected directly to the number of weapons which have been, of course, decreased. But we have here a risk problem since we have wars that involve countries that possess nuclear weapons. And that's something that we should avoid. We should make, there is an important correlation between nuclear disarmament, elimination of risk, of nuclear risk, and peace. We should make all the efforts possible in order to avoid that the conflicts will extend themselves. If conflicts extend, we go to a world which is much more risky than now, even though we have less nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hadian?
I would like to pick up where Paolo left. Paolo, I guess Pugwash would be in a good position if they commission a book in critique of Kenneth Waltz. At the university, to be frank with you, I have a problem to convince many of my students who have read, which they have to read, Kenneth Waltz, that nuclear weapons are bad for peace. Kenneth Waltz, I don't want to say convincingly, but strongly presented the position that we have the peace because of these nuclear weapons. So that's very important to have a critique. One of the most important points which we can raise regarding Waltz's argument is, the argument is certainly non-falsifiable. Meaning non-falsifiable. We cannot falsify the argument except when nuclear weapons have been used. Absence of the use of nuclear weapons, so his argument can be valid. And you cannot disqualify, you cannot falsify the argument by reasoning or by reference to empirical reality. That cannot happen. Anyway, I'm looking for a time myself to have a critique, a comprehensive critique of Waltz. And it is very important to have that critique, particularly in our part of the world. His ideas seems to be very, very convincing. So that's point number one. Point number two, regarding the question, I guess that would be good to have the coalition of willing, the countries who are supportive of non-proliferation and also disarmament, both or separately, to have such a coalition in order to work for both of them, to create a norm. To me, this normative structure, arguably, has been the most important factor which has emerged in the last 4 or 5 decades, which has persuaded many that it's a taboo to have or to use weapons, particularly to use the weapons. So that can also support creation, generation, production of a normative structure which would support non-proliferation and hopefully disarmament. So that's why, I guess, answering your question, yes, you have to take some initiative to do that.
Thank you very much. Jaramillo, please.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. Thank you very much. So just a few points, and I realize that this is perhaps the last round of questions. So first, to make clear that as strongly as I feel that Israel should not and must not have nuclear weapons, and that this arsenal is incompatible with many, many things, including the aspirations of civilization, I feel equally strongly that Iran should not have nuclear weapons, and I'm very glad to have heard in our meetings in recent years about that there is no desire, and about the religious decree, the fatwa, and the rationale for it, which makes a lot of sense. So to me, so I want to be clear. I don't want Israel should disarm, but I also feel strongly nuclear weapons would not enhance Iran's security. Would not enhance Iran's security or the security of any other actor in the region for that matter. So I want to be perfectly clear about that. Secondly, all states in the region have legitimate security concerns, some with the neighbors, some with the region, and some global. And yes, that includes Israel. Israel has legitimate security concerns. They do. We have to accept that. Israel has legitimate security concerns. I just don't think having nuclear weapons first is a way to address those security concerns. And historically, they have not helped Israel address those security concerns. So I think no country in the region, I want to be very clear about that, it's any one actor, no country in the region. Secondly, the pressure, if there is to be pressure on Israel, it should not come only from within the region. It should come from the international community, including NATO, including the nuclear weapon states, including the states that, and the paradox of the states that shield Israel, are the same states that make a rules-based international order a central pillar of their foreign policy. Well, these are the rules. The NPT, these are the rules. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. Third point, again, mindful of the time, I think we need to collectively sustain and maintain and promote the legitimacy of institutions, including the International Atomic Energy Agency and including the United Nations itself. And the role of these institutions, I feel, should not be taken over by individual states. These are institutions that are tasked with a specific mission that have or should have, or definitely must be expected to have a certain credibility and impartiality, etc. And these are the appropriate bodies, to make determinations, not individual states. And the last point, at the end of the day, there are two views about nuclear weapons. For much of the world, they are the gravest threat. Period. Full stop. The gravest threat to humanity, civilization, the ecosystem, etc. For another camp, they are the supreme security guarantee. And these are not compatible propositions. These are incompatible propositions. If they are your supreme security guarantee, what incentive are you going to have to give them up if they're considered to be your security guarantee? But unless and until that shifts to recognizing them as the gravest threat for yourself, for your neighbors, and for the globe, nuclear disarmament may not make real progress. So
thank you, Jaramillo. Apparently, Paolo, your fellow Italian citizen, has interaction to your remarks.
No, I mean, I agree. The point is that the distinction between the security guarantee and the dangers are mixed. There is a different perception. People can say, oh, it's a security guarantee to possess a nuclear weapon. Oh, it's danger. Both of them are, in a sense, true. The point is that how the security guarantee is evaluated. It's evaluated by the decision of leaders of the country that believe that maybe this is the less probable, this is making war less probable. That's the reason why I think that we should, in fact, avoid that the present war situation is going to extend. We should make all the efforts in order also to prevent nuclear proliferation. We have to make all the effort to eliminate and reduce dramatically the present situation of wars.
Thank you very much. Very important points by distinguished panelists. And I think that there are lots of topics to be further debated in future. But for the sake of time, we have to skip the next questions. And it's time for the question and answer. So I'd like to kindly ask the audience to be very short and concise in their questions, and please skip any statement that needs to be discussed later. But I see a lot of interest. I start with Dr. Dehqani, and please identify yourself in raising your questions, please.
Thank you very much. First, since all the distinguished panelists know very well what happened in '95, my question is that since the three documents were adopted at that year, were integral part of each other, legally speaking, can we say that as long as the establishment of nuclear free zone, WMD free zone in the Middle East has not been realized, the indefinite extension of NPT is conditional? You know, this is one question. The second one is that if we assume that in the region, in the Middle East, we have been able to establish a WMD free zone, do you think that for example, the US or France or UK give Iran NSA, negative security assurances? Because this is one of the main elements that need to establish such a zone in any region. And regarding the comment made by Dr. Hadian, I should say that although the Kenneth-Waltz view may trigger the nuclear disarmament negotiations to be started, I don't think that ultimately it makes the world more safer. And as you know very well, Iran also has never pursued nuclear weapons, and it is not in its program and doctrine. The last question is that membership of any agreements should be a privilege for states, not a liability. What we are witnessing now regarding Iran, we are betting onion and stick, you know, both of them. So how can you, as Pugwash, advise a country like Iran, who is member of the NPT, in full compliance with the NPT, and at the same time receiving sanctions and being advised by others that it should also accept the WMD free treaties in the Middle East? How can it work, and how can we solve this dilemma? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see three gentlemen asking for the floor, and please, I start with Mr. Haj Jafari. Please, very short, just in a couple of seconds.
Thank you. Dr. Hadian, your proposal regarding making a rival for Israel, does that really a solution, or you are making a justification for Iranian nuclear? And also goes to Madam Director, you mentioned regarding on the following the model of the Argentina and Brazil. As Dr. Shahristani mentioned that we are in a hot area and it's exceptional. Can you propose a new model that be more suitable? And also on the Paolo, you ask Iran not to leave NPT. You see, Iran is on the corner. There would be no solution at the end. Can we hear more tangible solution from Pugwash? Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, please, very short. Yeah.
Thank you. Very short. I'm Elder Mamedov. I'm also a member of Pugwash Council. So my question is probably mostly to Professor Hadian also. Yesterday, Steve Witkoff announced that enrichment is a very, very clear red line. And it seems that there is discrepancy between what is being conveyed privately during negotiations and what is being said publicly. So, yet again, so my question is, what impact those words, in your opinion may have on Iran's position and perception of this negotiation process in terms of its consistency and integrity.
Thank you. Last, this gentleman.
I'm Anton Hopkov, director of the Center for Energy and Security Studies from Moscow. I like the idea of regional cooperation a lot. And Karen, you mentioned that countries of the region could work together on some technical issues. As we know, there is a synchrotron in Jordan, which is a basis for regional cooperation, and Iran part of that. And I know also that Naser worked a lot on this idea in his publications. So my question goes, Karen, to you, Naser to you, but other panelists are welcome to respond as well. Do you have any particular ideas? What kind of technical projects or technologies could be in the center of cooperation between regional countries? Because as we know, since recently in the media there is a discussion about possible regional uranium enrichment center. But again, my point, what are the technologies which could countries of the region cooperate on? Thank you.
Thank you. I see one last question, the lady in the third row.
It's good. It's interesting.
Amna Ibrahim, GCC. I have a question about regional security dynamics. Can you hear me better when I stand up than when I sit down? Okay.
You look much better.
So if you look at kind of other countries, such as, for example, countries in East Asia that have not crossed the threshold, Korea, Japan, to name a few, they're also kind of holding on by a thread, is the perception. And the basis to why they have remained under the nuclear threshold is usually cited as because of a nuclear umbrella, right? U.S. nuclear umbrella, very hard security assurances from the United States, which doesn't resolve the issue of global nuclear disarmament, if you're extending a nuclear umbrella to prevent a state from weaponizing. What kind of regional security assurances, and where would they come from to create a dynamic that is different from that? Where do we start?
Thank you, but I see lots of interest. Mr. Rezai will be the last one, I promise. Please, do not insist more.
Okay. Very, very informative meeting. I really thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Ali Rezai from Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
So he's a director of or a strategic bureau at the Foreign Ministry.
In fact, my question goes back to the argument about the usefulness or uselessness of the nuclear weapon for the security of the countries. I'm very much personally interested in the uselessness of the nuclear weapon for the security of the countries. And I am the great supporter of NPT. But there is a strong argument coming out these days regarding the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. It says the situation would be totally different if Russia didn't have the nuclear weapon or Ukraine had the one. How do you explain this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we turn to the panelists. And
since I had two questions,
just 1 minute for each,
very
please.
brief, yes. Yeah. So I think this is a very important proposal. First of all, I just want to say that all this discussion is very useful, and this is something that we really welcome in Pugwash, all this dialogue and all the comments, which are also nourishing us. So thank you for all your questions. With respect to the Sesame project, the synchrotron in Jordan, this is an amazing project. Now it's in danger because Israel is not participating, but it was all the countries in West Asia participating there. And this is a model. We don't have the question what Pugwash can do. I hope we could offer solutions, but we cannot. What we can do, we do have some expertise, but not all the expertise. But we try to bring people together who can try to build up. Many brains think much more than single brains and individual and fragmented brains. So from my perspective from physics, more is much more than individual participation. So we really have to get together and produce ideas. Technical cooperation is important. One last thing I have to address, I think it's important also to concentrate. I come from a developing country too. In developing our countries, we have, of course, major philosophical concerns, but we have to think about developing the country. So what I would suggest is to try to reach agreements that allow for the development of our countries. Nuclear development is important for energy, for medicine, for sterilization, etc. So I think we have to prioritize the development of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. How to do that through agreements, etc., and leave other major concepts like criticizing things of the NPT, which I think are valid, but these, I think, have to be built in the longer term. But the short term is to try to think about the development of our people.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shahristani.
I'll respond to the first and the last questions. As to the first question, in 1995, when the member states discussed the extension of the NPT and the nuclear state countries proposed an indefinite extension, some of the Middle Eastern countries refused to accept the indefinite exception. And if any one country refuses, then the treaty cannot be extended. So to get around the problem, the three major nuclear countries, the States, Russia, and the UK, promised that they will convene a conference, they will co-chair it, and they will make sure that this is established. And the condition of extending it indefinitely was that this region should be established. But again, we are living in a world where there is no respect for the international rule-based order. The strong can do whatever it wants. We have seen it in Gaza, we are seeing it in Palestine, we are seeing it in south of Lebanon, we are seeing it in a number of other countries in the world. So it is true that the indefinite extension should not be effective because they have not fulfilled the condition that those countries required for accepting it. And they did not accept, by the way. They only abstained from vote so that there is no objection and it could go through. But this was the condition. But again, the strong can do whatever it wants in this world, unfortunately. As to the last question, what argument do we have for the uselessness of nuclear weapons? I'm focusing on our region. So nuclear weapons, I don't see, for example, for Iran, would have any use. Why? Because the only country that it threatens Iran with the nuclear weapons and Iran could retaliate in kind is Israel threatening. We know Iran cannot use nuclear weapons against Israel because of its care for the Palestinian people, because any nuclear weapon there will kill as many Palestinians as the Israelis. In addition to the fatwa that Islam does not allow. By the way, some people think that this is a new fatwa that Imam Khomeini has issued, and then it was followed by the Supreme Leader now. As a matter of fact, we had a couple of weeks ago a conference, a Pugwash conference in Iraq. Pugwash, Iraq has convened a conference about weapons of mass destruction in the region. And one of the participants, a Pugwash member from Belgium, who is the head of the working group of Pugwash on elimination of chemical and biological weapons, showed us a text from Al-Muhaqqiq Al-Hulli, who lived 750 years ago. It's not a recent fatwa. When he was asked, when the Muslim army was fighting against other armies, is it allowed that we use poison against our enemies? And his fatwa was then no, because this poison can affect other innocent people. And you can only fight a soldier who's fighting you. You cannot fight anybody, even that soldier. If he retreats, you cannot chase him. You just let him go. You cannot cut trees. You cannot kill animals. These are not acts of legitimate acts of war in Islam. So that's why the usefulness of nuclear weapons for Iran or for another country is based on that.
Thank you. Paolo, please.
Very quickly. I think that we are in a very dangerous situation, as I was saying before, we discussed it before. And I think that, as Shahristani was just mentioning now, nuclear weapons will not help Iran in any sense. Will create a more dangerous situation again, and will in fact induce, in this case, Israel to maybe attack Iran. That's a possibility. We don't want to have it. We don't want to have a large-scale war in the Middle East, bigger than what it is now. Already is a disaster. We have to stop the disaster. And in this sense, I think that the idea of getting out of the NPT, eliminating the constraints on building nuclear weapons is something which is intrinsically dangerous. Cooperation is another approach, which is not maybe directly affecting the nuclear risk, but is important. You have to cooperate in terms of energy production, nuclear energy production, with other countries, as we were saying before. And there's a possibility. Will increase also regional cooperation, which is very important in general. I think that we should be very careful. There is no clear solution for everything. That's something. It's a word which is a little bit mixing up, and then mix it up, and then we have to try to do what we think is the best, and it's not necessarily going to be the best, but we have to work in the direction of working for peace, in a sense, in the region, and avoiding the building up of weapons of mass destruction.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. First of all, regarding the legal issue, I am not coming from a perspective which prioritizes the legal issue to political issue. Exactly the opposite. So it is the political context which gives meaning to legal documents. So to me, they are far more important than the legal text. Regarding my friend Haj Jafari, I did not propose that Iran to be. In fact, I have provided 14 reasons why nuclear weapons, would not enhance our security. Rather, it is going to increase our vulnerabilities. So I did not proposing that Iran should have that one. But after being involved for more than 25 years in this discussion of Middle East free of WMD, I have come to the conclusion that unless another country, the best would be Egypt, unless another country has nuclear weapons, Israel will not give up its nuclear weapons. And I don't see, to be frank with you, I don't see why they have to. Why they have to give up their weapons. Unless another one, then they're going to sit and talk and negotiate seriously about the issue. And there are ways to deal with what Witkoff said. To me, there are, first of all, that's a negotiating position. And that's what we say too, we are not going to give up anything. But once we sit down and talk, very much at the end of the day, we are going to maneuver. Expect a lot of maneuvering. We are going to prepare ourselves for the war, and they're going to bring B-2s back again, B-52s, aircraft carriers, so forth and so on. Basically that's what doing. Making the use of the threat of force credible. That's what they have to do. And that's what we have to do is, we have to credibilize, if I'm allowed to use that term, to say we are ready for the war. The other side should be convinced we are ready for the war. And both of us have to be convinced everyone would pay for the consequences of the war. No one is going to be safe. So that's why, at the end of the day, in the final analysis, they're going to sit and talk, find a way. There are a number of alternatives, a number of proposals on the table, which would address both our concern and their concern. For instance, one can be 1 year of suspension, 2 years of suspension of enriching uranium, provided we keep the stockpile of enriched uranium inside Iran. And once we begin the enrichment again, we can ship them out in a process to Russia. Okay, but in 4 phases to me. In 4 phases, and the last phase should be at least 1 year to the presidency, to the next US presidency, to be sure that the next US president is not going to withdraw at will or due to domestic politics of the US. So there are a number of other ways. This was just one proposal. There are a number of other proposals on the table which can be very helpful and find a way. But right now, we are in a maneuvering stage. Both of us are going to basically say that, okay, we are going to have a fight, we are going to have a war. But no one wants the war. War is too costly, too many unknowns, too many uncertainties. So then we are going to see, of course, in this process, we have to be very careful about miscalculation, accident. This thing can generate wars. So we have to be very careful about that.
Thank you. Please, Jaramillo.
And thank you for your patience, everybody, but also very pleased to see the interest on these matters. I want to address your excellent question about the usefulness, uselessness, because I think it's very relevant and in the specific context of Ukraine, you know, and I think the notion of deterrence comes to my mind, you know, the application of the realities of deterrence. And I have to say, I disagree with several of my disarmament community colleagues in Geneva, in New York, etc., who speak of the myth of nuclear deterrence. And I'm like, what's mythical about it? You know, you see it in real time. Of course, the conflict in Ukraine would be very different absent nuclear weapons. Completely different, you know, the reaction by NATO, the risk that Putin is willing to take, that sort of thing. So nuclear deterrence is a very imperfect, yet very real reality, pardon the redundancy there. It's very real, you know, but it's very unpredictable and highly dangerous, which is why I've always said the call, whether advocacy or strategic, should not be that deterrence doesn't exist. I mean, I think we need to recognize that it exists to the point that it shapes conflict. You know, the reasons for conflict and the conduct of conflict and the outcome of conflict. But the proposition, I think the more realistic proposition is, yes, it exists. It works sometimes, to some extent, in some circumstances, but the benefits, real or perceived, are vastly outweighed by the risks, including the humanitarian risks. So it's not that deterrence doesn't exist, and I think when people speak of the usefulness or uselessness, they think, okay, look at the actual example. Is it shaping the conflict? At the end of the day, is it shaping the conflict? And I think, yes, it does, but it's a very highly dangerous, and I don't think humanity and the international community should put its security eggs on that basket. And to your question, I'm sorry I forget your name, excellent about, you know, the just below threshold. I think that's a very good point, of course. And first, the nuclear umbrellas and the nuclear sharing in Turkey and Belgium, this is against the NPT. But I just want to, and I promise I will finish within a couple of minutes, I just want to, I'm reminded of, I think it was 2008, this article in the Wall Street Journal by these 4 American elder statesmen, Kissinger, Schultz, Nunn, and Perry. And they had this famous line, or recognizable line, that a world without nuclear weapons will not simply be today's world minus nuclear weapons. So, you know, it's not just a matter of I think we need to think of the country-specific, region-specific vulnerabilities, the expenditures in conventional weapons, which are through the roof almost across the globe, and the impact of all of this reality. So it's not just about the nuclear weapons themselves. We have to consider, you know, what conditions will make states feel safe. Because if states do not feel safe, there will be that temptation, to use that word. So thank you
very much. As we have exceeded the time limit, it remains me so I have to skip the conclusion as well, but I'm obliged to thank you all for your participation. Our dialogue today proved that though we have challenges, but alternatives also exist, and our people deserve security and a life without nuclear weapons in the whole region and also in the world. So to our panelists, thank you very much for all your invaluable insights. And for the audience, please take these messages beyond this room. These were very wonderful ideas. Thank you.